everybody. I am really excited about today. I've been in a bit of a gnarly mood today, and this STEM challenge is the absolute perfect one to pull me out of that because this one is one that in a normal year, and I know we're not in a normal year, that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about it. In a normal year, this is a STEM challenge that is really joyful. Right now, what you're looking at is a picture of what it looks like if we do the Christmas version of this challenge, but there's also a winter version. So I'll tell you how to sort of navigate that if you need to or want to. But um, it's one of those ones because it usually contains a relay race where on its face value, you might think, how on earth we can't make this work during social distancing or distance learning, but we absolutely can. I refuse to give up on these joyful sort of moments that we can have. We just got to look at it a little bit differently than maybe we might usually. So, with that, I think I'm going to dive right in. I have lots of different pictures to show you. I have some different things on hand here as well in person to show you so that you can believe me when I say we can do this. So, today is the fourth day, the fourth challenge that I'm doing. I'm going to do one more tomorrow. And if you missed any of the other days and you want to go back and look at them, this Christmas STEM blog, all lowercase because it's a bit.ly link and they are case sensitive, it'll take you to a blog post where I've embedded the video of the normal year and the pandemic makeovers like I'm doing right now are all there all in one place, so it's easy to find, so you can check that out. I'll pull the link back up for you again later if you need it, but let me first get this thing off the screen and share this screen. Okay, so the main goal, or what we're doing in this challenge, is students are designing and building reindeer antlers to either hold Christmas decorations or reindeer food as they complete either obstacles or a relay race. So I know there's a lot of like either or here because I'm looking at winter versus Christmas and I'm looking at relay races in a normal year, or if you're sort of like self-contained doing this with your own personal family, you could still manage to do a relay race. But for most of us, we're going to be doing some form of obstacles instead. So this is what I would usually use for the materials. Now, this is for the Christmas version, but we usually primarily use craft sticks and then maybe pipe cleaners, string, or some kind of connector, right? So pipe cleaners, string, tape, or rubber bands to sort of hold things on. And then this year, we want to think about the fact that our kids are going to be potentially at home, and we can't expect them to have all of these things or even most of these things. So I want to show you, actually, I'm going to show you in person a couple of different options. So one thing I did is I just took a cardboard paper towel tube, although you could still do this with the shorter ones, but it might be harder to come up with as many antlers, right? But you can see I have different options here to hold off some different reindeer food. And I'm going to tell you some options for that too, for your materials. Another thing I did is I know all this week, I've been talking to you a lot about using scratch paper or using ads or junk mail. So I did sort of a combination of using different things. And I've also been talking to you a lot about using address labels that come in the mail. That might be something your kids have, even if they don't have tape or even if their parents don't want them to be wasting tape. So I actually used just scratch paper. This was a toilet paper tube, and these are my mailing labels to create this antler set. And then we'll talk about the materials and how we test them in engaging ways. But let me come back to materials and let's talk about what if you want to do not a Christmas version. What if you want to be thinking about, now obviously in this picture, these are sort of the Christmas versions where they'll use candy canes and different Christmas ornaments, and or bows and things like that. We usually just go to Dollar Tree when we're going to do that. But if we want to keep it winter, then we can look up what do reindeer eat. And you can either tell your kids this or you can have them look it up. But they'll eat things like mosses, ferns, grasses, and leaves. And if you introduce that to your students, then say we need to figure out what we bring in and have stand in for reindeer food. So one thing you can do, if your kids are able to go outside and there are leaves on the ground, there were right outside of my house, so that's an option. I can just pull those out. Another thing I did is I looked in my junk mail today, and this was actually these like little leaves and things like that. The picture was part of what was in the grocery store ad for Thanksgiving. And I used a rubber band that I had around some produce that I bought. And this will be how I connect or I decorate my antlers. I know this seems really silly, and it is a little silly, but it's also really fun and interesting. And I'll tell you how to ways to do that. Same thing. This was more junk mail. So these are my reindeer food options. I also was looking through um, what do I have in my house that I already have. I had this green ribbon, so I think that could be some good moss that I could have on here. I had some different kinds of string on hand. I wouldn't expect kids to have all of these things necessarily unless their parents are crafty, or maybe they're crafty and their parents let them have these things. Um, and even something as simple as, these little things that go around your bread to keep it contained. There are lots of different options that they can use to decorate their antlers with either Christmas decorations or reindeer food. And then what you would want to do is have like maybe 10 items. You would ask them to say, you're gonna need to build your antlers. Let me bring this back in a way that you can connect up to 10 different items, whatever version you're doing. And we want to make sure, like I was saying yesterday, that we don't make it too easy, right? We want to keep the essence of what makes the challenge challenging in its, initial form or its normal form. And what makes it tricky and not just like crafty, because I don't want to be crafty. I want to be fun, but I want it to also actually be STEM and not just a craftivity. So one of the things that makes this difficult in a normal year. Actually, let me walk you through it. Let me walk you through what it looks like kind of normally, and then what adjustments we need to make to keep it, rigorous, but also take into account the different materials and different, restrictions that we have. I always want kids to learn to be resourceful, and I really do believe that they have access to a lot of materials that don't require them to buy anything or go out and get anything new. One other thing that I didn't mention that could work, depending on where your kids live, if they have access to the outdoors and a park, is even just twigs that are already on the ground. I would want them to have like singular twigs and not like things that are already sort of branched out and antler like, because I want them to have to manipulate. We talked about that yesterday too. And actually, one other thing I meant to hold up, if they have chopsticks in their house, which they might, or even like at my grocery store, if you go by the deli section, they actually will give those out for free, a little set of chopsticks. So even that could be their base. Tell them not to just take them. They should ask if they aren't buying food for it, but you get the drift. And also, they always have to ask their parents for permission if they're using any of the items at home. Okay, for materials for this. So in a normal year, the criterion constraints, you might set it up to say your antlers, you're going to be building antlers, and they must be used to transport and quickly remove 10 decorations or food items. Oh, I didn't finish my sentence, but don't worry, I'm going to come back to this. And they can't touch the decorations or food during the design test, which will make more sense. And I'll clarify that when we get into how you would test your designs. And you can also decide to require or constrain certain angles, either by measurements or estimations or by type. So you can say your design must feature at least one acute angle, one obtuse angle, one right angle, or your design may not include any right angles. You can sort of mix and match that however you like. If they have access to protractors and the ability to measure their angles, you can say, I need you to show me that you have, an angle that's a 45-degree angle present. And if you want to make it really tough for older students, you can require that they build or create their design in a way that they are hands-free antlers so that they aren't holding them up to their head. Most of the time, I let them do the holding up to the head. So in a normal year, what we would usually do is every single individual student designs one antler, not a pair, but one antler, and they start with a partner. And so that person and their partner might design together the same exact antler, but they each build their own one of that. And then together, that means they have a pair. That sort of cuts down on the amount of materials that are needed. And it also cuts down on the amount of time it takes for the kids to get through their first build. And then what we do from there is we take 3 of those partnered teams and we put them together to make a relay race team. So now they're 3 pairs or a team of 6 for the relay race. And then what would usually happen is if I am with my partner, I'm going to hold up my antlers. Everybody else is in their line. And when the race begins, the teams have to decorate the person's antlers as quickly as they can. Once all of the materials are on the person's antlers, they go around, they don't usually run. And this is one of the things that I was mentioning earlier when we want to think about the essence, what makes the challenge difficult, so that we can try to keep that in place as much as possible. Well, what usually makes things tricky, two things about this. One is when you get the materials on and you decorate, and the students go to either run around the cone and come back, or walk, do sort of a fast walk around the cone and come back. A lot of the time, the decorations, just from the wind of doing that, will try to fall off, right? Or will fall off. This is why we usually send partners in teams, because one is sort of called the handler. And if a decoration falls off, the reindeer has to stop. The handler has to put the decoration back on to the antlers, and then they have to come around the cone and come back. Sometimes we throw obstacles in there as well, but for the most part, you can just treat it like a relay race on a normal year. Don't worry, I'm going to tell you how to do this differently this year, because we know we have to do social distancing. But the other thing that makes it tricky is that when they get back to their team, we need the team to take the decorations off and put it onto the team behind us. We're all together, right? But we're 3 partnered groups that have formed this big relay race team. So we take all of these decorations off and put it onto the next person's. And so because we have to have it be something that's easy enough to remove, but still stable enough to stay on, that's kind of the heart of what makes this tricky, because they can't just like tie on, or like glue it down or tape it down. It has to be something that's easy to remove, because otherwise they're going to get caught up in the amount of time it takes to do it. And then what would happen is my partner and I would go to the back of the line. And if this is confusing, and I understand there's no visual here as I'm saying this, on that the website where I said the Christmas blog was, I actually like show you like this is partners A and partners B and partners C. But my teammate and I would go to the back of the line and sort of trade places, so that everybody in a team gets a chance to be both the reindeer and the handler. So everybody gets a chance to run the relays as both roles, or both jobs. And so I just described the race. So that's in a normal year. So you can see in this case, these 2 are partners. They've got the one antler that the one built and one antler that the other one built. And the other one's being the handler and helping to decorate before the race begins. Now, we can't do it that way probably this year, unless you're thinking of doing this at home with maybe your own personal family, right? So the first thing that we can do, and I always recommend you do, is explain to your students, your class, and see if they can come up with ideas because this is a problem, right? This is a real life problem that you're having, is you want to do the STEM challenge, and we have new restrictions in place where we can't really work in teams to decorate together. So what are some other ways we could test our designs? And can we involve it in a relay race, or do we have to shift it or change it entirely? See what kind of ideas they come up with, because they might come up with some pretty good alternatives to a relay race that will still test their designs. Remember, we want to keep it the essence or the heart of what made it difficult in the first place, which is primarily about, not entirely, but it's primarily about when you're trying to move quickly from one place to another, the wind can drag. Let me take this off for a second. The wind can drag things and try to pull them off. Now, in this case, you can see like the way that these are hanging on here, these are not likely to fall off. So you might want to think about, is that okay? Or do we need to add in some kind of requirement that whatever's hanging off of here, that we have some variety? Because there's pretty much no weight to these. It doesn't really test the strength of the branches, or I guess they're branches, the branches of the antlers. I don't want to think of this as a tree, because it is an antler, it's meant to be an antler. But that's another thing you can do, is sort of like require that whatever the decorations are, or the reindeer food, that there's some variety in whatever they're putting onto those antlers, so that some of it's heavier, some of it's maybe a little bit trickier to attach. So it's an option. You don't have to do it. You can do it strictly like this, because we still have the issue of trying to get, this is still actually, even though it's not going to fall off, part of what makes it stay on so well is going to become tricky for me when I want to take it off. So here's some different ideas. Now, I really recommend involving your students in creating whatever the tests are, but here are some different ideas because I want you to have some things in mind just in case they might have a little trouble with it. Okay. So one thing you can do is like have your kids on a Zoom call. And even if you've got hybrids, so some are in class and some are on Zoom doing this at the same time, and you have like a Simon Says kind of thing. And what they have to do is hold up their antlers. And I would have them design two. In a normal year, like I said, I would have them just do one and then they get with their partner and then they have their set. Since we're not doing it that way this year, I would have them design two different antlers. And the antlers, they can choose whether to make them identical or to try two different designs, essentially, because maybe one is stronger and better at holding the heavier materials, and one is, maybe a little bit flimsier, but it's easier to hold on to or something. So they can make them identical, but they don't have to unless you decide you want them to. And you would call out sort of challenge moves on Zoom. Or you can have your students suggest challenge moves on Zoom. So let me come back for a second. So if I'm holding up my different antlers and I have my different decorations or food on them. So these are kind of funny. I want to try to make them similar there we go. It's a really funny looking antler. But you can see already, like, it's just silly, but it's fun. And it can be challenging, right? So one of the things you could do is sort of have this be an opportunity for them to stand up and stretch. So you can have them do like a deep squat or a lunge. You can have them sort of do a jump to the right, a jump to the left. You can have them maybe they have to do a bend where their back is sort of flat, because that could be tricky to keep your antlers upright. You could do, like I was saying earlier in the year when we were talking about apples ahead, which was another relay race one, where you sort of pretend your nose is like the tip of a marker or the tip of a pen. And you might use this as an opportunity to review something, like if you said, oh, what is 4 times 4? And they have to sort of design, or not design, but sort of like draw the number with their nose while holding up their these things. Now, none of that creates the wind that you would get if you're trying to do something quickly. And I do think that that's an area that we need to try to figure out if it's possible to do in a way that's safe, because we can't expect our kids to run in their homes or even necessarily do anything quickly inside their homes, because we want to make sure they're being safe and that their parents don't get upset with us. And on the flip side, we don't want to send them outside of their home, because unless their parent is with them or we know they have permission, it might not be safe. So I do think it is the kind of thing that I would try, if possible, to have kids collaborate in small groups, whether that's a shared Google slide or Flipgrid, where they design different ways to test. Maybe they actually use a hairdryer around, or a fan or something like that. And always getting permission. I even really like the idea, let me bring this back in, I think it's the next thing on here, of having groups work together to create sort of their own test within a group. So it's almost like a secret handshake in a way, but it's the group collaborating on, like, what are some different moves that we're going to use to test our different designs. And then part of that should be, actually, I think it's coming up, so I'll stop my thought because it's gonna come back in a second anyway. But another thing they can do is actually practice their dance moves or their test moves, and sort of perform that on Flipgrid, or present it as a challenge to other people to test their own designs using their moves. And I did already mention the multiplication facts or spelling words, or spell your teammates' names, while testing your design. And then ideas for measuring success. You could just have them count how many items remained on your antlers after whatever the test was that you did. And maybe that's the kind of thing where, like, if their parents are into it, you could, make a suggestion, or like even have a list of different ways to test your design, get parent approval, and then test it. Because if they have a yard, or like even just like a street, they can just sort of like do like a quick walk, like a 1-minute walk coming around. But you also want to have them time, whether it's an obstacle course. If you're in person, you could do it like an obstacle course, even if you can't do like a relay race, because they're not handing things off. But part of what was important, or part of what was making this tricky, as I mentioned earlier, is the removability of it. So one thing you could do, even if we're not doing the full, like go and do some kind of like hula hooping or whatever, walk around the playground, whatever it is you're going to do with your antlers, you should at least do a time test of how long does it take to get your 10 items on your antlers and get your 10 items off your antlers. See, like when I pulled this off, it actually pulled my antler out, and I would require them to fix their design as part before they could, stop the timer. One other thing I was going to point out is everything I used today. I've already mentioned some of the materials, but everything I used was stuff that was like basically food, some kind of either junk mail, scrap, and I had this twisty tie that was from a produce thing as well. So I didn't have to spend any money on any of this, but this like pretty green ribbon was just something I had. But I'm trying to do that as much as possible. There's so many things you can do with paper that go beyond just towers. Towers are great too, but like you're going to get bored with those, and so your kids at some point. So timing things, and you could time that as a whole. You could have even if your kids are hybrid and you've got some who are online watching you, you could be counting the timer up and just say like, okay, antlers up and empty antlers up, and and you count down 3, 2, 1, and then they start decorating. They're putting all the things on, and then maybe you do it in a way so it's like, here's what we're going to do. 3, 2, 1 means you start to decorate your antlers. Once you have your antlers, you come up, you've got them, and then you do whatever the test is. So maybe that's like, I know I have to jump 10 times. I know I have to do 10 side bends. I know I have to spin around once. Maybe raise your leg up or whatever, like they're doing like knee lifts or whatever the succession of things are, they do that. And then they undecorate, they take everything down, and then they sit down in their chair. So everything's really in place in the room, but it'll be silly and it'll be fun. And don't we need that, right? So it can be anything like that, but I know I keep saying it, but involve your kids in deciding whatever those moves should be, because they're going to be more bought into it and they'll really enjoy it. Okay, let me put this back into the stream. If you want to extend this, one of the things you can do is have them either identify or measure the angles present in their design. You can also have them study polar animal habitats or adaptations. One thing I really like the idea of here is when they go and they choose. So like what I would do here is say, look for animals that live in the Arctic or the Antarctic, and choose one that you're interested in and learn about its habitat, learn about what does it eat, what is its diet, just like, some general information about it, jot down your notes, and then see if you can have them create their own STEM challenge. In the way that we did, we focused in on reindeer antlers and turned it into a STEM challenge. Can they find something about their animal to turn into a challenge? That is the kind of thing that will probably be best done in small groups or with partners, even if they can't be close to each other, just to give each other ideas and to bounce ideas off of each other, whether that's on a shared slide or Flipgrid or whatever. That could be really interesting. And then if you have time, you can actually let them do that STEM challenge. And then they have, let them know what their constraints are. We've got constraints because we don't know what materials people have. Or even if we're all together, everyone needs to do their own challenge. So we need cheap materials because I'm not buying fancy stuff for our whole class. Can't afford that. So it needs to be cheap or recycled materials. And we know we have to have social distancing. So what can we do? How can we create a STEM challenge in these circumstances? Depending on how much experience your kids have, that'll be easier or harder for some, but it's a good thing to try out every now and again. And then there is a print version of the handouts that go with this resource, as well as some like videos and some supplemental sheets for like those polar animal things. And there's also a paperless version. I want to remind you, this is the last day for half off hybrid resources. If you go to bit.ly/grateful for teachers, all lowercase, you're going to see today is the last day for the half off hybrid and for entries into all of the giveaways, lots of gift card giveaways, books and resources and some other stuff. So I'm going to put that on one more time, and There it is. So grateful for teachers, all lowercase. That's where you find the half off resources. And that's also where you find the gift card giveaways. And then Christmas STEM blog, all lowercase letters, will take you to the blog post that has all the Christmas and winter STEM challenges. There are 5 that I've done. Well, I've done 4 this week and I'll do 1 more tomorrow. And the regular video is there for a normal year, plus some of the modifications I've been suggesting for you this week to make it work with social distancing and distance learning. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week. I don't think I see any questions. I don't, but if you are watching this later and you have some questions, just pop them in the comments. I will get notified and I'll get on that and answer that for you as quickly as I can. And that's it. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening. Bye for now.